Hey there, CJ Math students. Welcome to Homework 5.2, one-step equations with rational numbers. You can go ahead and check off if you watch the whole video. Calculators are okay. In fact, strongly encourage that you use them. All right, so we're just like we did yesterday. We're going to solve, justify, and check by plugging in our answer. So first thing we need to do, draw our scales of justice. And my variable is on the left-hand side, so therefore I'm going to work with the left-hand side. I see addition. So therefore, when I see addition, I'm going to use subtraction to isolate my variable. So if I have 4/3, it's positive 4/3, I'm going to subtract 4/3 from both sides. Subtract 4/3 from both sides. 4/3 minus 4/3 is 0. Drop your variable on down. A is equal to. Now, you got to be very careful. This is a negative 1/3 minus 4/3. Luckily, we already have common denominators. And maybe even if you wrote this off horizontally, you could see how this works off. Negative 1/3 minus 4/3 is really plus a negative, and it gets you negative 5/3. Again, this is why we have our calculator. You could literally type this in, negative 1/3 minus 4/3, without doing the KCC, and it would give you a negative 5/3. So D is your answer. Remember that you subtracted 4/3 from both sides to get negative 5/3 as your answer. Now, to check, we actually have to write out the equation. So we're going to write out 4/3 plus A equals negative 1/3. But this time, instead of A, we'll go ahead and erase that, and we'll actually just plug in our answer, negative 5/3. So is 4/3 plus negative 5/3? Oh, that gives me negative 1/3. Negative 1/3 equals negative 1/3. I know I have the correct answer. Let's try number 3. So my variable is on the left-hand side. I see subtraction. Therefore, I am going to use addition to isolate my variable. So I draw my scales of justice. I'm working with the left-hand side since my variable is on the left-hand side. To isolate it, I add 1.5. Again, putting the plus sign is important. Negative 1.5 plus 1.5, that's 0. Drop down your variable R is equal to a negative 2.1. This is a DSSM if you wanted to label it. B is your answer. Notice again how I put 2.1 on there if you're not careful about your signs. The signs matter. Again, using your calculator to write negative 3.6 plus 1.5 to double check is important. So I added 1.5 to both sides to get negative 2.1 as my answer. Again, I'm going to check. So the original equation was R minus 1.5 equals negative 3.6. So now I'm just going to replace R, erase it with my answer, negative 2.1. So negative 2.1 minus 1.5 equals negative 3.6. Some of you may be sitting there being like, I don't know if that's true. Well, if you do a quick little plus and negative, you'll notice we have negative 2.1 plus a negative 1.5, which turns out to be a negative 3.6, equaling a negative 3.6. You could even do this without KCC and simply plug negative 2.1 minus 1.5 into your calculator, and you'd still get negative 3.6, seeing that both sides are indeed actually equal. All right, backside, this is going to be one of the last ones I do. In fact, I'm going to skip number 5. There's no reason to freak out because you got a calculator. Even though you don't have common denominators, you have a calculator to help you out. So no reason to freak out. Number 7 is what I'm going to go ahead and do. So my variable is on my right-hand side in this problem. Notice I'm working with this side over here, the right-hand side. I see multiplication, right? Even though I see a fraction, and usually that means division, I see a fraction, negative 1/5, right next to P. That means multiplication. So therefore, I am going to use division to isolate my variable. So that means I am actually going to end up dividing both sides by negative 1/5. Divide by negative 1/5. In doing so, a negative 1/5 divided by negative 1/5, that's 1. Ha! All I'm left over with is P on that side, equals 2/15 divided by negative 1/5 ends up being a negative 2/3, right? So D is your answer. Now, you could do all this work if you really wanted to put it off to the side, right? 2/15 divided by negative 1/5, right? You'd flip it. You do 2/15 times 5 over 1. You'd cross cancel. You'd still get 2/3, right? Or you can just say, hey, I got this handy dandy calculator, I'm going to go ahead and use that. So that's why I'm erasing there. So I ended up dividing, or I divide negative 1/5 on both sides to get negative 2/3 as my answer. To double check, I'm saying 2/15 is equal to negative 1/5 p, but now I'm plugging in. And remember, when you got a number next to a variable, you're going to want to plug in with parentheses. So parentheses, negative 2/3, close it up, and we're going to multiply this side to make sure it equals this side. 2/15 is indeed equal, a negative times a negative is positive, to 2/15. So I know I am correct. All right. So that's it. You're responsible for the next ones, as well as 9 and 10. Write down what your variable is, your equation, and your solution. Show all work, and call me if you have questions.